Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first set of functional panels during Google's VetNet Career Week. I'm Mary Spence, a program manager at Google and a proud former military spouse. Over the next hour, I'll be talking with three Googlers in engineering and product roles to discuss their journeys, their recommendations for finding similar roles, and what day-to-day life and expectations are like in these functions. Through hearing their stories, we'll uncover helpful insights to inform your career decisions. All right, let's get started. Nick, Claude, and Harp, I'd love for you each to introduce yourselves, tell us what team you work on, and at a high level, explain what you do on a daily basis. Nick, why don't we get started with you?
Okay. So my name is Nick. I'm a design engineer. So it's a mechanical engineering background, and I work on phone accessories. So specifically, that would be the phone cases for the Pixel phones. And that's within the hardware group, getting much more specifically down to those kind of products.
Awesome.
Day to day, it's essentially trying to figure out how to get the artist vision of what the product should look like, the industrial designers, into something that can be made at volume, hundreds of thousands of units. And that's a balancing act between doing CAD work, so looking at the 3D in a computer to figure out how to actually work with the vendor to make the tooling so they can mold parts or assemble parts. And then, I mean, there's obviously things like emails, but you're also diving into tolerance analysis to figure out how to stack parts together so they can all fit. And I would say day to day, it's not necessarily the same, but sort of product cycle, it is. You've got your early release stuff, which is going to be about the same for a month, and then you'll revisit that a year later. And then once you start getting real parts, now you're reviewing the real parts to figure out where the issues are. And then try to improve them, working with the artist again to figure out, well, where can we work around this problem that's going to keep arising? And then where do I push on the vendor to figure out a new solution?
Great, thank you, Nick. Claude, I'd love to hear, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about the team and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure, thank you. I'm Claude Castillo. I've been at Google for 11 years and change, and I work on the Google Photos team as the data stewardship engineering lead. That means that I run a team that focuses on anti-abuse, privacy, and security efforts on photos. Day to day, we find ourselves kind of working through Google Photos top risks, the risks for our users, finding new ways to make sure folks have the transparency and control of the data that they need, and working through like rough edges in the product. Yeah, that's roughly it.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Harp.
Hi, Mary. My name's Rahul Harpalani, but everyone calls me Harp. I'm a product manager in GCP and specifically on the cloud operations team. We make software that IT managers use to manage and control infrastructure at scale. Basically, behind the scenes, there's a ton of cloud infrastructure, and there needs to be software to manage it, and we make that software. As a product manager, on a daily basis, I engage with customers and try to identify what they need and what problems they're facing. And I look at kind of larger business objectives for our business and our competition in the space, and figure out how customer requests or problems that we want to solve, how that kind of fits into the greater competitive landscape, and usually try to craft a solution and design the requirements that we want to solve with an engineering team, and really garner support around the solution from Eng, from design, and from many of our supporting efforts. And then we try to build it and ship it.
Awesome. Thank you all. Really exciting to have you here and the opportunity to get to chat with each of you. So great to hear all the different roles. And so everyone's kind of in a very different role. I'd love to listen and hear from each of you how you got started in this current role.
I can go first again. So mine was a bit serendipitous in the sense that Google was building a an accessories team in hardware at the same time I was looking to come to Google, and I had an accessories background. I also prefer accessories to the main product, such as a phone, because the phone's in this massive spotlight. Everyone across the team, across the industry is looking at that thing, which means everyone who's closely related to it is really hands-on. But the accessories people tend to kind of forget about until they just get one. So it's a little bit more fun for me to navigate that world with a little bit more responsibility on myself and less having to balance all these other cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. But then it was the typical, how do you get that interview, getting through that interview, which you may be aware that Google's pretty well known for having difficult interviews, and then actually getting the offer. So it was exciting, but it was stressful to get through all that.
Great. Claude or Harp, I'd love to hear how you got started in your current role.
Sure, I'll jump in. For my current role, I had already been at Google for about 5 years. I joined the photos team, and roughly 2 years in as an engineer working on the team, I'd made the case to build a team around trust and stewardship. And this is very much a case of right time, right place, right leaders. Leaders were super supportive. We started small with a security team, and that grew into privacy and anti-abuse. And now this much larger engineering team really focused on user trust. I can't say that approach will work for everybody, or that you'll always have leaders who are super invested in a space like that. But there's a lot of trust in me. There's a lot of trust in the mission. Super lucky. But I also I really appreciate the opportunity, and we drove it. It's been a really successful stance.
That's really awesome.
For me, getting started in this role was pretty strange route to Google. I had left the military as an infantry officer after 7 years and really wasn't sure about what I was going to do in the civilian world. I was all in on the military, but ended up being injured in combat. So kind of had to reassess what I was going to do. Luckily, my younger sister was a product manager, and she used to talk about her role often and very enthusiastically. I went back to grad school, and while I did somewhat fight the urge to follow in my little sister's footsteps, I found that over time, the PM role really fit my skill set. And I think that some of the competencies I learned in the military were very applicable to the role. So I pursued it aggressively and actually applied to this role in 2019 at Google and didn't make the cut through interviews, and then tried again in 2020 and was lucky enough to make it through the interview pipeline.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm sure your little sister loved to hear that part. I guess it would also be great to kind of hear a little bit more about maybe what surprised you the most about this role that you're in today.
Harp, you go ahead. You may as well pick it up, right? Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're welcome to go first if you'd like.
No, I was going to, Harp just finished. May as well pick it up.
Sounds good. To me, what surprised me about the role, Google is a very big and established company. So I thought I would have, as a new product manager, learning the trade, I thought I would have a lot less autonomy, and it's been the complete opposite. My manager has trusted me with pretty substantial business decisions, um, and has asked me for advice around potential acquisitions or really large decisions that impact our business, our revenue, our positioning amongst our competitors, and really this has been a pleasant surprise because I always said in the military when I got out I want a lot of autonomy, but maybe it's a little bit maybe I'm got a little bit more than I bargained for. But I really think that's the biggest surprise about the role is that I get to work through problems, craft solutions, and then brief upwards what I think, and often we'll just execute on that. Claude, do you have like a similar feeling about the autonomy you have at Google?
Yeah, I was gonna pile on with that. There's just this expectation around leadership and this trust. Um, it's earned, but it's at the same time once you have earned it, um, it's surprising how much you influence the business itself. In terms of like what surprised me at least, like in terms of the day to day, I built the team. Nothing surprises me. But in terms of my leadership's trust in what I do and and my team's mission or roadmap, um, and kind of like my autonomy to execute, uh, yeah, it's remarkably surprising. But I don't think we haven't earned that either.
For me, the surprising part was how startup feeling the hardware organization felt. So keep in mind, this is a relatively small group of a few thousand people in this massive software company. So not all the processes were set in stone. Some stuff was very flexible, like how do you want to store your files? There's no specific thing that I had in previous jobs. Some processes are pretty locked in terms of the overall development of a product, but in terms of day to day, it's very scrappy in a lot of ways. I'm filling in gaps that aren't technically in my job role, but I'm happy to do it. And we're just all kind of doing that to move the product along. And not something at all I expected from a company of this size. But I'm actually quite happy that it is that way.
Yeah, that's awesome, Nick. Claude, one thing that you mentioned was you put together this proposal around trust and being able to kind of translate that passion into the direction of where you wanted to kind of grow in your role. How can veterans and military spouses translate their passions for a role into being an asset for a hiring manager?
That's a really great question. I think when you're kind of presenting yourself to a hiring manager, the first bit that they see of you is your resume. Um, it's a lot of folks are looking for some evidence of passion for your space, either within or outside of your job, your previous experience, and it rarely comes through. So putting in the extra effort to kind of make your passion shine through, especially when they're related to the role. And if you love what you do, and if you found something outside to kind of further explore your space, and for engineering, that could be a number of things. Um, Hackathons, work with your kids on programming or a Boy Scout troop. It could be classes you've taken on the outside. It could be open source work. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal role at a company, but it's proof that you really care about what you do beyond the day to day, your 9 to 5, and that does set you apart.
Um,
Harp?
uh, yeah, Nick or Harp, if you have anything else for how veterans and military spouses can translate their passion for a role into being an asset for a hiring manager.
I think it was well said. I think you covered everything, but I would just add continuous improvement and training, any way you can demonstrate that, regardless of your background and education, kind of showing a hiring manager that you're still learning new skills and trying to stay extremely relevant as technology is constantly changing. Like even the sharpest computer scientists are having to continually learn new, new skills.
Yeah, well said. And maybe just to give folks a little bit more context, it'd be really helpful to just share the degrees you hold and if they are related to your current role. So, Nick, I know you kind of shared a little bit about this, but maybe you can start and then we can listen to Harp next and then Claude.
Sure. So I have a bachelor's and a master's in mechanical engineering. And they definitely are related, but I would say the thing that was in like the first day of intro to engineering at college was we're going to teach you how to think like an engineer. And that ended up being incredibly true. So it's not necessarily about the actual things you're doing. I don't use all that crazy math that I at one point knew how to do. Spreadsheets are doing all the heavy lifting, and even then, it's nothing much beyond just your basic multiplication, addition, and division, right? I'm not doing any differential equations. But the like tolerance analysis was probably one day in that entire 6 years of school. And that I use pretty regularly. So it definitely how to just problem solve. That's what comes out of it. It's getting enough arrows in your quiver of how to troubleshoot, problem solve, root cause analysis to get to a good, robust design. Oh, and internships. Those were super helpful. I highly recommend doing those along the way.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Harp, do you want to share a little bit?
Sure. My undergrad is in systems engineering, and the big relevancy there is data analysis. I have an MBA, and during business school, I was gearing to focus in tech. So a lot of, even though it wasn't part of the business school curriculum, a lot of focus on CS, but the MBA is extremely relevant. And I actually didn't realize how relevant it would be because of the constant business decisions I'm making on a daily basis. And then I have an MPA, but really it's a pretty generalized degree, but the focus was economics and specifically applied microeconomics. And again, they're just data analysis and making sure. So why is that relevant? It's because you need to make sure that you capture the proper success metrics and that you can measure what outcomes you're trying to capture are as a product manager.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love Nick's point about you don't know what you'll use, but you probably won't use everything. It's definitely true. For me, I started off pre-med. Computer science was the fallback. I did double major in computer science and psychology. It turned out I didn't like medicine as much as I thought. Love development. I did wind up following through with a double major. I got honors in both, and there's this interesting cross between psychology and computer science around user experience and human factors that was super interesting anyway. So that I use in terms of just understanding UI, understanding how folks interact with it and their expectations. I didn't expect to use it, but here I am. And the computer science fundamentals, how to solve problems, Nick's right, is what you walk away with. Really getting that baseline for that, and obviously, like most of the stuff I used in computer science and for the interview, it was my first like 2 years of computer science around algorithms, data structures, and you never stop using that. Yeah, that's my story.
That's pretty awesome. I also was an engineering degree and a double major with mathematics. So Nick, I totally agree. I think the first day of like you'll learn how to think like an engineer has really helped from the program management perspective in my role. So Although I do miss the differential equations, unlike Nick. I liked the math.
Yeah,
uh,
never use that advanced differential equations outside of that classroom.
yeah, that's fair.
I will
uh,
add that beam bending is something that I've not really used at the job, but has come up in every single interview I've done in consumer electronics for a product design engineer. So study up on that beam bending if this is the path you want to go.
Good advice. Um, awesome. And just in terms of like a recommendation that you have for veterans or military spouses that maybe have limited to no experiences and are interested in starting a career in the role that you're in today. So I know Harp, you chatted a little bit about some of the ways that you maybe didn't have an experience or you just learned about this role and how you kind of took extra steps. So maybe you can, if there's anything else you want to elaborate on that to get us started.
Sure. I think it always boils down to education in my, from my view. Um, the education, basically, you can major in anything, but essentially, like making sure that you get exposed to the right things, um, so that you understand kind of you have a relevant like foundation for the job you're applying to. No experience, I definitely think is again fine. I was not a product manager before, but I made sure that I kind of studied the specifics around product management and maybe some of the components that would be that would make product managers successful. I obviously talked to a lot of product managers, like my little sister, and a lot of her friends who were very familiar with the industry. Um, a big component of it was just like online coursework, auditing extra classes while I was, doing a major in a different field, and then again, constant almost interviews of people who were currently successful in the space that I wanted to pursue. That seemed to be really helpful and give me the context over a couple of years to kind of finagle my way into a Google PM position. I'd
Awesome.
also say that Nick mentioned earlier internships. Those are instrumental because you can always get an internship in a job for, maybe it doesn't pay, but you can get something that like otherwise you would have no exposure to, and that can help you get another internship that maybe does pay, like during a summer, and then that can get you another internship during the school year, like while you're in grad school. And finally, like after 2 or 3 years, you have a whole portfolio of experience, and almost validation in a field that you had no exposure to before.
Nick, I don't know if you have anything else to elaborate, but again, definitely second the internship piece. I've had my fair share in my career, and I think they helped at least confirm what I did not want to do full time. So
Yeah, I would completely agree with the internship thing, as you'd probably guess. But it does two things that were both just mentioned, right? It allows you to decide, is this something that I want to do? Because specifically for me, mechanical engineering, my internships were in the manufacturing side. One was designing tooling and fixtures to assemble diesel filters, and the other was more project management side from an engineering perspective, in a different industry, but still manufacturing. And knew I didn't really want to do that project management side. So I was able to steer more towards what I was interested in, even though I ended up in a different industry altogether, which I'm super happy I got into consumer electronics. It is what I wanted to do, but at the time I graduated, I didn't really know how to put that into words or like conscious thought. It was more just seemed like a fun stretch goal. So like when I graduated, I interviewed at a steel mill, and my life would be completely different had I gone that route. So there does need to be some flexibility based on what jobs are available at the time. But I would also say if you've got some goal of the industry you want to be in, uh, careful not to stray too far for too long, or that will be the industry that you are in. Because if I was to switch from steel mill engineering to try to get to Google, I think it would be a much harder path.
Thanks, Nick. Claude, any recommendations?
Well, I think what we probably haven't said about the internship bit was the fact that working in industry isn't being at school, it isn't being in the military. It's a nice exposure to how to do the work in place. It's like it's just different. And that's something that folks transitioning, military spouses, etc., may not have been exposed to. So you get to, in a low risk way, experience working in the industry. But it's also a foot in the door. The place you intern at, whether you put your internship at, maybe the place that's willing to put an offer out to you as well. Because it's a try before you buy. There's no better indicator of your performance than you doing the job. So if you're fortunate enough to get an internship, work your hardest and kind of show what you can do. In terms of like going back, I'm trying to roll back to when I was a hire at Google. It's unlikely you can walk in with no experience in like a management role. Regardless of how mature you are, how much initiative you have, it's something that you have to experience to do. But earlier on, there are many ways folks without experience can kind of build that up. Internships are one. If you are really passionate about research and you're getting follow-on degrees, that's another way because you begin to specialize. You might get a peek with your research into the kinds of things that you're really interested in, and we may not all have Harp Sister, but leveraging your network is just another really good way to understand what's going on. So there may be folks in your circle who are working, who already moved on and graduated and are working in the industry who you can leverage or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. That was I'm glad you touched on that, Claude. That was going to be my biggest recommendation, was to kind of leverage your network. And also folks that you maybe have met in your internship or in your social circle, even like veterans groups. I'll tell you a story. My husband, when he was transitioning out of the military, leveraged the Google VetNet group and was able to connect with folks to figure out what he wanted to do after the military. And so I think that that's a really awesome recommendation, is to just chat with folks who are in the role that you want to be in and ask them questions on what experience, what skills can I build up, and use that well. So thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, why don't we chat a little bit about what are some key misperceptions about engineering that new hires need to know in order to successfully navigate engineering organizations? Nick, why don't you help kind of share some key
Sure.
misperceptions?
So I would say the misconception that I had coming into this world was that engineering, like the design engineering, is going to drive product decisions. When that's not really the case at all. It's in an influence. So it's one of the factors going into the decisions. And then in hardware, a more obvious one is going to be the operations team needs to be able to make the thing. So there's another bit of influence. You could have this super cool, beautiful design, but if you can't make it very easily or they're super costly to make, then that's a bad design. And then like a less obvious reason that a decision could get made is just the sales team needs to be able to sell it to like a big retail partner. So if your major partner has some requirement on that product, you have to get that in there, or at least have a good reason why it doesn't make sense. So there's a lot more into product decisions than I ever expected, especially the bigger the company. You have that many more people on the cross-functional teams.
Awesome. Claude, do you have any key misperceptions about engineering that new hires need to kind of think about?
Sure, a couple. First is probably that as a software engineer, that we are sitting down writing code and not talking to people. This is very much like, as kind of to the next point, people-driven. Decisions need to be made. Folks need to collaborate constantly in order to get things done. We're working at a fairly large company, and nothing gets done by yourself. Maybe at the micro level when you first start, but it all rolls into something bigger. And even if you're not seeing it, somewhere the decisions are being made, and you do have some influence on those decisions, or you're making them yourself as time goes on. So there is no hiding. You're working with other human beings all the time. And probably the next one would be that, especially for folks coming in, like most folks who are veterans are non-traditional students. They're coming in a little older. There are people who are smarter than you. And you might be hiring people that are smarter than you. You'll be lucky if you do, and you'll often not be the smartest person in the room, despite your years of experience, despite like your judgment in other spaces. So there's a lot of like humility that makes you successful. Being open to learn from people who are different than you. Like those are skills that are super important.
Awesome. Thank you, Claude. Harp, anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to make sure we touch on for key misperceptions?
Claude said it perfectly. This is a collaboration environment, and the best products and the best software gets created when there's a ton of collaboration, probably a lot of compromises, and eventually there's strong consensus between engineering, product, and design. And that's usually what leads to incredible products being made and shipped to users. So it's really not a head down organization. It's very collaborative. And I would just emphasize that.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Hart, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how mentors have assisted you in your journey to where you are today.
Sure. Again, the road to Google is a tough one for everybody, and I think also the road to a good civilian career is a tough one for all transitioning vets. So essentially, I kind of break it into two components. You need a mentor or some kind of sounding board to figure out what the heck your place is in the civilian world when you're leaving the military. Huge loss of identity. Way more difficult because you have your information and option overload. You need to kind of figure that part out. And then separately, once you do start to target a certain industry, you need people from that industry to either validate your hypothesis. That's a space you want to be. Maybe it's not. I used to think I wanted to work in Wall Street. I tested it out, was not great. Was not a good fit for me. But once you do kind of find the right place and you want to get there, again, meeting people who do that job, meeting people who manage people who do that job, that's crucial. And you can meet these people from your military network. You can meet these people through school, like through your EDU network, and you can just cold call. And I'll say, like, being a vet if you're in school, those are very powerful because essentially you could write a cold email to someone with your .edu email address and saying, like, I'm former military, I'd like to learn about your thing. You have a very high chance of success there, that they'll take your call and that they'll spend some time on you, which I would say is a huge advantage because I don't think others have that same kind of success in cold calling. So it's something you should definitely take advantage of because it's a unique position.
Awesome. Claude, do you have anything to share regarding how mentors maybe have assisted you to where you are today?
Sure. My career has been dotted by a number of mentors, I think. Both official through formal mentorship programs and folks that I sought out myself. Like, Hart made a good point. Like, going off and being proactive about that is a big deal. There are folks who we want to learn from, and I think that does shape how you are as a leader, how you are as a manager, how you are if that's the right you take, and how you do your work and become successful. Because by yourself, you have no frame of reference. Your manager is your free mentor, but there are many, many other folks to seek out, all willing to have a cup of coffee for the most part, and talk you through things. Yeah, some of my what I sought in a mentor has changed over the years as my career has grown as well. So where I'm seeking to grow, what I need to do, that changes. And finding mentors that fit where you're kind of setting your goals is the right thing to do.
So you both convinced me I need to find a mentor now. Maybe give some advice on how we even start, right? So I think it's sold that we should have mentors to kind of assist in our journeys. How did you get started to maybe find a mentor? Nick, if you can kind of maybe speak to that a little bit.
I would say one of the most impactful mentorships that I had was when I first started. So my first job out of college is I asked someone who's really good at what they did. They were the tech lead on my team at the time. And it was a great experience. He helped shape my approach to actually working as a product design engineer. So that was super valuable versus if I was just kind of drifting along. I mean, again, this is fresh out of college, so I didn't have strong direction, so to speak. It was more just someone told me to do this, I'm going to do that really well. Someone told me to do this, I'm going to do that really well, versus find that end goal, so to speak, and work your way there and pre-ask the questions that are going to come up and answer them. A lot of that kind of stuff comes out of a good mentorship. And I'd also say if it's not working out, or if your job role changes, like feel free to change your mentor as well to one that suits your needs at the time.
Yep, I agree. I think it's definitely a relationship, right? So have to go and meet a few folks, see the skills that you want to grow, get the advice. And I think, Claude, you mentioned this, that mentors have changed along your journey as well as what you were seeking, what that support that you were looking for. Harp, you kind of chatted a little bit about like reaching out and like emailing folks. Like how are you finding these folks, and like how, if I was like looking for a mentor, how would I go about doing that? If there's anything else you want to add to that.
So I think that strategy is very effective in terms of finding the folks. I looked at alumni directories while I was in graduate school, and that really, really helped because you had the affiliation of school, you were currently a student, and then you would just throw the fact like, hey, I'm a veteran, like I'm trying to figure it out. That really helped land conversations and calls. And at that point, it's really up to you to turn that person who's taking time to help you, turn them into a mentor, and essentially engaging them and kind of you need a little bit of luck. They need to be willing to do it, but I think that's generally my approach. There's also a lot of luck to it. A lot of times, you can't necessarily be proactive. Right now, I have a manager who's significantly more senior than I am, but is essentially very, very vested in my success and in kind of not just making sure I do the current role correct, but kind of lining things up so that I become a generally successful person in kind of my career field in product management. And because of her investment, like that's been huge. And I've definitely been very aggressive in capture and hey, like asking her hard questions and making sure that she understands like her input is having a huge impact on my decision making process for my career and kind of how I map things going forward.
Awesome. Yeah. I think another thing is leveraging like your LinkedIn network. So reaching out to other folks who are veterans and just letting them know. Always start by asking like, what do you do? People love to talk about what they do and like learning a little bit more. And so I think that's also really helpful when reaching out. Awesome. Claude, you chatted a little bit about this in terms of veterans, but maybe you can give us a little bit more around key attributes that you think are unique to veterans that give them an edge in engineering roles. That was a little bit of a tongue twister.
Sure. I think that veterans are, unlike your average college new grad, come in with kind of this expectation within themselves that I'm gonna like drive leadership. I'm going to be independent. I'm going to take things at the end. I'm going to make sure the right thing happens. Um, and that's something that is learned over time that veterans kind of come in with a leg up on. It's a bit of like good initiative, bad judgment at first, because your judgment um, doesn't necessarily help you in engineering yet. You kind of learn your technical skills and your technical judgment over time. So there may be missteps, but there's no one that doesn't appreciate initiative. And most folks who you're sitting alongside as you start aren't comfortable enough to flex their leadership yet. They haven't learned that. So there's a natural comfort um, in owning what you do, owning your brand, and moving that veterans tend to come in with. Um, I would say that the owning your brand comes a little later. They're a little more humble than most, but um, I think leaning into that leadership and that independence is an amazing start to put your best foot forward, um, and that your manager will appreciate it.
Absolutely agree. Harp, any key attributes that are unique to veterans?
Yeah, a ton of them. Let's see. The way I kind of talk about it, and mine is geared more towards product management, but I think it's very applicable across the board. Is I kind of think of three. Um, I guess I'll give an example of the military component, and then like why it's applicable in PM land. Um, Calmness is a big one. What I found when I was in the Army as an infantry platoon leader, like if something hit the fan, we were in a firefight, taking a second, then giving really like calm and concise instructions over the radio would make that calmness kind of contagious to the people, to my team. And like that's something that's very relevant at Google. Like there's a lot of things, a lot of fires out there, and you need to be super calm and collected because that's contagious to the rest of your team. And it's something that I think, like everyone respects. Um, Decisiveness, like often at Google, we have paralysis by analysis. This is actually true in all engineering circles. Um, and like in the military, a good decision now was better than a perfect decision later. Like me choosing the like a decent spot to do a medical evacuation of an injured soldier was important to make that decision quickly, as opposed to like me sitting on that decision and trying to figure out the perfect spot. And that is a constant um, that's a constant theme at Google. Being decisive and just kind of giving direction around things that you don't have the perfect information for. Finally, Claude's touched on this a bunch, but I would say, the teamwork aspect. A lot of people think engineers and maybe Googlers kind of just operate unilaterally. That's absolutely not the case. Collaboration is absolutely essential to delivering anything that someone wants to use. Um, and like in the army, you would make sure that your field artillery folks had their things lined up, that aviation was read in on the operation, that not only your team but your like supporting elements to your left and right were all read in on the plans, because that's the only way you would succeed. And that's exactly the same thought process that leads to successful teams at Google. So like that's kind of how I break it down, Mary.
That's awesome. Um, and all really great attributes. So just to summarize, it was leadership, decisiveness, calmness, and teamwork or collaboration. So I think those are really great attributes that you shared. All right. Why don't we turn it over to our live Q&A on the Dory and hear what some folks who are listening in want to ask all of you. Um, this one's for me. How has Google supported Mary as a military spouse? That's wasn't surprised. We were trying to ask them questions, guys. There's a lot of ways. So there one, we have within our VetNet community, we do have our military spouse community, and I am very involved with that community. So we often reach out and support each other when it comes to questions around, hey, I need to, my family is moving, my family is, my partner is deploying, and I maybe need a little bit of time or flexibility around where I work or taking days off. And that is something that Google does offer military spouses to support military families as they're going through a life event. And there are days off that you can utilize to be able to take care of those decisions at home that you need to. We also have internally, again, as you are moving around, you may need to look for different roles or help have that conversation with your manager on how you can remain flexible in your current role in terms of location, flexibility and location. And that obviously post COVID is that flexibility will definitely be there for all Googlers, but pre COVID was something that most military spouses just kind of had to navigate on their own. And I would say Google has offered internal mobility specialists, and our human resources group has been really great at making sure that managers have the resources that they need to help support military spouses, again, through those life events and also kind of navigating their career. Um, so that's just kind of a few top of mind. All right, let's see. Kevin asks, Harp mentioned doing a lot of research to learn about product management. Can you point me to any resources to learn about this in greater detail?
Off the top of my head, I would say there's a website called Exponent, and the guy was a product manager at Google before he created the website. It's a bunch of training materials for software engineers and product managers, and a bunch of interview prep. And that guy went to school with my sister, and they both studied engineering together, so it was like validated by her. But really phenomenal website, and that's the only thing I can think of top of mind.
Awesome. All right, let's go to the next question. Christopher asks, hi, first off, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I'm an Army veteran now with over 15 years of experience, but do not have a degree. How does Google look at this profile? Claude, is that something that you can maybe speak to?
Sure, I'll take a crack. A lot of this depends on the role you're looking for. I go to Google Student Veteran Conferences and some others where I kind of see this pretty often. Resumes from veterans who have a ton of experience, but perhaps like not school yet. We have a ton of roles at Google. Not all of them requiring a college degree. Some of them requiring pure, like if you look at the job postings, pure job experience. And while some may lean into that, into like needing a degree to finish, not all of them do. What were you doing those 15 years? How competitive are you? What is the role you were applying for? Those are things that I would look at. There may be some value in spending some time outside, picking something up, not necessarily a full college degree. That's obviously the more typical candidate. That looks good. But I've seen less typical candidates have some success here as well. And in the engineering side, I've seen surprising success with things like boot camps and the like, and that's coming up more and more often. And there's still value in that 15 years of experience that you can leverage. So I guess all is not lost. Don't assume that a college degree is everything. But it does make you look less typical and maybe more difficult for certain roles.
Yeah, and I think Harp, I don't know if you have anything else to kind of add to that, but I'll definitely say you'll always see on job descriptions, it'll always say, looking for this degree or relevant experience. And so just to kind of touch on what Claude touched on is making sure that you are extracting, there's a lot of experience in that 15 years in the Army. I will tell you again, my husband was 14 years in the Army, and he pulled a lot of that experience. So look at those key attributes that Claude and Harp shared earlier. Make sure that you're sharing examples of that leadership, that decisiveness, you've done a lot in those 15 years, and make sure that you're able to translate that experience for the role that you're applying to, and making sure that that's very clear for the hiring manager. And so kind of spell that out in your resume, and make it clear for the role that you're looking for.
Actually, on the back of that, sorry to interrupt. Veterans have a really hard time writing great resumes, especially in situations like this. I think getting all the help you can to really kind of highlight that experience, like Larry said, in terms of like the role you're applying for, is a huge deal. Don't overestimate that.
And also don't be afraid to have different resumes for different roles. So again, depending on the experience that you're trying to really highlight and shine, and get that feedback for building your resume and translating that military career that you do have into your resume. All right, next question. Aman asks, "Hi, Nathan. Can you repeat the certificate details again, please?" Maybe it was Nick.
I
Yeah, I don't know what
recall
certificate.
talking about a certificate program.
All right.
After the
Aman,
raw-
if you can clarify the question. We have Claude, Harp, and Nick. And so if there was a specific certificate program, feel free to jump in the dory and ask again. All right. Anthony asks, "I'm currently in a cyber defense information assurance degree and should be finished at the end of this year. Congratulations. Is there any programs within Google that would fit this degree, or is there any apprenticeship or internship opportunity that I can apply for at Google?" Claude or Nick, do either of you know?
I don't know the timings of the internship roles. We've residency roles. We have IT roles at Google that are kind of like contractual residencies as well. We for sure have roles for security researchers, security engineers. We have I'm hiring security folks for what it's worth. There are plenty of roles for folks in cybersecurity at Google. There's just keep an eye out for the open roles. Not all the roles may be located where you want them to be located, but nothing like an apprenticeship quite. Residencies, I think, are as close as we come. Like the 2-year contractual things, or like post, like somewhere between an internship and a full-time role, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I definitely would say check out our internships, and it sounds like with that degree, definitely looking at some of our security roles would be very applicable.
Oh yeah, please apply.
All right, maybe we can take a few more. Albert asks, +1 for both the data analyst cert and a professional portfolio. Nate, I think this is maybe also not the right group. Maybe we can take the next question, because I don't think we're. All right, Eric asks, "Given a limited 2-page resume, how do you phrase your softer, transferable military skills that an employer could find useful in a leadership or management role?" Harp, do you want to take a stab at this one?
This is the $1 billion question. I think typically what I've seen is to lean on a 1-page resume as a pretty hard and fast rule. But maybe Claude might disagree. I've seen 1 page to kind of, which makes it even that much more difficult. And really, how do you highlight it? I think a big component is translating what the heck you did in the military to something civilians would understand, like that everyone would understand, and really capturing the core competencies that were required to do your job. So like everyone respects like a gunnery sergeant or a platoon sergeant in the military, but like that doesn't translate very well. So like maybe figuring out like, okay, you were a manager of 4 direct reports and 28 people total, and you executed these tasks, and like these are the kind of things that you had to coordinate and synchronize to accomplish whatever. I'd also say one other thing is using kind of a format like they call it a STAR format: situation, task, action, result. But really, the takeaway is like saying what you kind of did and being very results oriented. Meaning, like if you did something, like what was the accomplishment that you achieved? So that doesn't answer your question. I don't know that this would be the right setting because it's a long, I have a much longer answer, but keeping things pithy, translating any kind of military nomenclature to like normal speak, and then being very results oriented in each bullet, and potentially leveraging like data or numbers in those results.
Very well said. Yeah, and I think even specifically quantifying what you've done, like I was responsible for this many people or this much dollars in equipment or anything like that, I think will just naturally speak to that leadership, and we'll be able to kind of give a little bit color on some of those other softer skills. Claude, did you have anything else that you wanted to maybe cover?
I think, like Harp, I have a spiel for resumes. The number of pages is interesting. The longer your career, the longer your resume will likely be. Like one page is if you've been in military for 4 years or in industry for 4 years, one page is right. 15 years, likely you're into 2 pages, right? It's just how things progress. But impact focus is the right thing to do. Like you only want to fall back to a job description when you don't have much more to say. You should be talking about impact and role, things you were responsible for, things that would have only happened because you were there. That's where you're gonna have a lot of value. But on the soft skills, it's difficult to do that even on an industry resume. You know, you may have like a sentence or two on your ability to resolve conflict and the like, but where resume is kind of more about your experience and the impact, you're gonna find that you can kind of touch on your soft skills after you get the interview. Unfortunately, it's an awkward place to start getting into really highlighting those soft skills. Unfortunately, so it's if you can find a way to do it, please tell me, because it's a tough one.
No, I agree. I think trying to use your resume as like a little taste, like giving them a taste of kind of what they're going to learn more about in detail in your interview is almost like using that. And that's really why I think even with a lot of experience, if you can get it down to a one pager, you're not throwing everything on the resume, right? But again, it's just being able to give a little bit of color on paper so that when you're in that interview, you can kind of touch on these other parts, and making sure that you have examples of those soft skills that you want to highlight so that you have them readily available when you're chatting during the interview. So I think that's both really great advice. All right. Well, we're actually out of time. But again, I wanted to thank you, Nick, Claude, and Harp for the wonderful stories and helpful information. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else that is listening today did as well. So thank you again for participating on this panel. To our viewers, if you're interested in learning more about Google, our roles, opportunities, or you'd like to review our career readiness materials, please check out the resources tab on the Google VetNet Career Week landing page. Following this, we'll have 3 more functional panels starting at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. If you're on the live stream, you can stay on to view panelists' business roles, including sales, marketing, policy and comms, project management, and finance. If you're more interested in other career such as engineering roles or non-engineering technical roles, you can view those panels on our Career Week landing page. All of our functional and industry panels will be recorded for you to view later at g.co/vets if you missed any of them. Thank you again for watching.